some of these UFOs or UAPs are from extraterrestrial origin. None of them are hostile, but we have been targeting them with electromagnetic directional energy weapons since the 40s. And those technologies have become more and more sophisticated. And, they have not struck back. If they did, the whole planet would come to a standstill, because I think they're fundamentally peaceful and very highly developed socially and spiritually. However,
how do we know that?
Well, because there have been a lot of people who've had contact, and there's no evidence otherwise. Now, there are some scary stories, what we call the stagecraft of, so-called abductions and mutilations and things like that. But those are all done by covert human programs. Those are lookalikes. We can get into that. I mean, there's a whole section of the archive on that. And we actually document this. I have top secret guys who come forward on the record stating point blank that they have been part of operations abducting people. And in fact, the very famous astrophysicist, Dr. Jacques Vallée, who some of his work ended up in Steven Spielberg's movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he's up in his 80s now. And in 1992, he wrote a book, and he had a log entry where he had received a 1985 CIA document that outlined, for psychological warfare purposes, them using these advanced technologies that look like an alien craft and other technologies to, quote, abduct peasants in Argentina and Brazil for their psychological warfare value. Now, that's in black and white. And so people go, this sounds crazier than the myth you've been told, and it is. But why would they do that? Werner von Braun, in his deathbed in 1974, told a member of my team, Carol Rosen, that their plan is to create, eventually, an hoax, a threat from outer space, to try to unite the world, like Independence Day, the movie, in a sort of a military global junta of humans against aliens. It's all nonsense. It's BS. But it sells well. It sells movies, it sells tickets, it sells books.
This is the Blue Beam, Project Blue Beam?
Yeah, that related to that. And I've met with many men who've been on operationally, like literally have been operational on those programs. Now, it went from really clunky stuff, like the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. People think that was alien. It wasn't. It was us. Late 50s, early 60s. And I think President Obama's actually working on a documentary about that. And it was an interracial couple, a very interesting story. But most people have no idea what really happened with that. And this is one of the really disturbing parts of this archive, is what are the technologies that are in the hands of these sort of monsters, and how have they used it to deceive the public, but also deceive policymakers and presidents. Once you reach a certain level of clearance, and you realize how monstrous and criminal the operations are, will you stay with that? I'm dealing with a team right now that I can't see. I won't even say what state they're in. But let's just say in September, I was on a classified helicopter over 2 black sites and was shown where the underground openings are out in the desert, where the man-made ones come up and are tested. But there are also electromagnetic pulse weapons that are illegal by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that are, and I have video and photos of this. One of the photos is in the archive. I'll just tell you that. And there looks like there's a landing strip. It's not. It's an area with diamonds on it, and that's where the man-made, some people call them ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, come up from underground. And I have the photos and video of the underground opening. We went right around it because this guy was cleared. He's one of the top people in the system, but he's wanting to defect.
And it's one of these 100 people, one of these couple hundred people?
He's very high up. I wouldn't say he's on that policy level, but operationally, he's been read in for many, many, many years, and he's very high up.
What's his reason? And so you went there and you actually saw it?
Yeah, videotape. I have all of it.
And it's public?
Some of it. Off the air, I'll show you the video of it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. People get very cold feet. I mean, I'll tell you a weird story that happened in the past year. There was a man who had worked out of the northern Nevada test range. His testimony and information and the drawings of this event, are in the archive. We took his name out because he doesn't want to be known publicly yet. But he reached out to me about this, and he was on a retrieval team. So it was at if you go from Nellis Air Force Base way north where the nuclear test range was, where we did open air testing, there's a huge area, and there's an underground base there and facility, and there's a team, a helicopter pad team with Delta Force guys, and then this guy had been part of the retrieval operation in hazmat suits. He was first put in there to retrieve man-made, the triangular UFOs that are coming out of Northrop Grumman and Raytheon that would malfunction and crash. And we have great artist rendition of exactly what these look like. Then he was moved into an operation where they would target, someone was targeting, not him, the extraterrestrial ones, and stun them, and they would go in to retrieve them. And when he realized what we were doing, and he had an encounter with two of these EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities, is what they're called, or aliens. I don't use the word aliens. People think of someone from, Peru. But what happened is he was so sickened by what they were doing, he tried to separate from the operation, which you generally can't do. But he had an uncle, and we know who he is, very high up in this clandestine program, who helped get him out. But then he subsequently went through a whole series of events, including an attempted alien abduction with these fake-looking gray aliens. And he actually knocked one down. We have a great artist rendering of how it split open what looked like the skin, and they were all fiber optics and integrated circuits and stuff. This stuff is very sophisticated technology, way beyond what people can imagine we might have. So when he reached out to me, he was going to come, actually, to the National Press Club and the congressional things we did last summer in June, about a year ago. And a van pulls up, an SUV pulls up, guys come out, and they say, you step one step further. Look at your phone. And they had put child pornography all over his phone, all over his computers, and says, you won't see your two little children again. Because he was recently in these programs. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. One of the problems is, a little knowledge is a very dangerous thing on this issue. And it's very easy for someone with a limited amount of access and information to have people come in and steer them in the direction of the aliens are eating us for lunch and taking our babies, right? That whole rubbish. But that is really the stock in trade. So if you move in that direction, doors will open. If you actually start putting out the truth, every door will close. Same thing with Hollywood. I had Arnold Kupelson, who was a huge billion-dollar producer back in the 90s. And you'll see in the archive, 1997, I did a congressional briefing offsite with the first early gathering, or the second early gathering of whistleblowers. The first gathering was 1995 at Asilomar in California. This was 97 in D.C., but at the Georgetown Weston. And so members of Congress came, and Dan Burton, who was chairman of Oversight, came, and this was all, there really, people really were very interested in hearing this. This was not public. It wasn't in the news. And what I found was one of the men who came, he was going to tell the members of Congress that next day. We had a day first where we met about having been on an interagency committee back in the 70s, where they could hit a button, basically, and stage an alien attack on the planet and all that. And that all that had been in place before he got there, and I think it was 73 or 4. That night, some guys that he had worked with came to the hotel, took him from his hotel room to a secure site out in Virginia until those briefings for members of Congress was over. Now, some of the raw footage of that meeting is in this archive now. It was old Hi-8 or VHS tape. It is not cinematic. It's not a production, but it's interesting, very interesting.
Ever since you released this, has anybody weird reached out to you?
Well, people weird reach out to me all the time, but
I'm talking threats. I'm talking we're going to release this thing you did 22 years ago.
Oh, sure.
Stuff
that
like
happens
that.
all the time. I just ignore it, and I have. What's good with the folks who are around me now, they monitor what's going on around me. one of your friends before we came in here asked me this, and I said, nothing like that's going to happen and not be known. And so now that there's a SAP stood up to literally arrest and create a criminal case against someone who pulls those kind of illegal operating, you can't threaten. I mean, if you threaten someone, that is in itself a crime, right?
Yeah, but I mean, they do it all the time.
But they do it all the time.
Regular Tuesday for them.
Yeah, but now this will be trapped.
With this thing that you have,
I'm really starting curious June 20th.
I'm really curious to know what the level of credibility and protection will be.
Well, we'll see. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I trust the director of the team that's liaisoning.
This three-letter organization,
the group. Yeah, and we've spent a lot of time.
Are they three-letter or no?
Whatever. I mean,
let me ask this question on the nuclear side, right? You hear stories about, a lot of times when the aliens show up is when we're in war or nuclear,
absolutely,
fears and all this stuff. And then you hear about the time where Eisenhower is on vacation and he steps away for a few days. Apparently, allegedly, he met with aliens because aliens said, you give us the nuclear stuff, we're going to give you some powerful technology. The world was so worried about it that even Associated Press reported that Eisenhower's dead. He died from, cancer or heart attack. They just made up some kind of a story.
Right.
And he was alive all along. Now, some say that's a myth. Some say that's true.
No, I have a document from the Ministry of Defense of France.
I want to hear it.
Well, that's in here, too. And there was a man who reported out about that meeting. It was at Muroc, M-U-R-O-C. It's sort of near where Edwards Air Force Base is now. It didn't exist at the time in 1956 or 7 when it happened. But yeah, that did happen. And you're spot on in bringing up this point that when we started detonating atomic and then thermonuclear weapons, everyone knows what an electromagnetic pulse is. What they don't know is that embedded in that is what's called a scalar pulse. And Nikola Tesla was one of the original researchers of scalar electromagnetic. And to make it simple, the light we're seeing or electromagnetic is a wave like this, like a sine wave. And it propagates at 186,000 miles per second. Scalar, or it's also called longitudinal, is a point and a line that goes out, boom, at multiples of the speed of light. But when it's done in an uncontrolled way, it rips the fabric of inter- or transdimensional space-time, which disrupts extraterrestrial communications and transport systems. So when we detonated the first atomic bomb, boom, all of a sudden there were ET vehicles investigating everything we were doing on this planet, because it wasn't just that we were on a path where we could kill ourselves. We were disrupting other operations that are extraterrestrial.